To disassemble and repair your Nokia Lumia 520, you will need a T4 Torx and small bladed screwdriver, and you'll need a plastic separation tool. You can use a guitar pick, plastic knife or your thumbnail. If the screen is still responding, make sure the device is completely shut down. Remove the battery cover and take out the battery, micro SD memory card and the SIM card. Now we need to remove all the screws on the back. 5 of these screws are self-tapping. And these last 3 screws are threaded. That's slightly different from the self-tapping ones. Using your thin plastic tool, separate the clips, which I've marked in white. These are not too difficult to release. And then you can remove the rear casing. This contains the connections for the 3G GSM antenna, which you can see across the bottom. If you need to remove or replace the loudspeaker, you can lift this from the housing. When you fit the replacement, make sure the 2 contacts go towards the center. Now unplug 2 flex cables. This one's for the Digitizer touchscreen, and this one's for the display screen. And gently lift the main board from the bottom past the clip. And now you can lift the main board up and away from the casing. This is the vibrating motor. This is a grounding or earth pin, volume up and down switch, another earth pin, your screen lock and power switch, and your 2-stage camera switch. This is the main voice microphone. The sound enters this small hole. The micro USB port can only be replaced using a hot air soldering iron to heat all the contacts at the same time. This is a test port for the 3G GSM antenna, your SIM tray, micro SD memory card tray. These are external test ports for the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth and GPS. The main camera can be removed by inserting a very thin blade each side, and the camera can be lifted out. If you need to replace the main display, start by releasing 3 clips on this side. These are not too strong. Using a thin screwdriver, lift that screen frame away and gently separate the digitizer from the display. If you need to replace the display, lift it from this corner There's a very small amount of double-sided tape holding this in place, so it's not too difficult to remove. These are the two strips of double-sided tape holding the display in place. If you need to remove or replace the headphone socket, gently lift that away from the casing. A small amount of double-sided tape holding that in place. And using a thin screwdriver, lift the flex away from the casing. If you have a new headphone socket, remove any protective film from the double-sided tape and make sure that locates all the way down and that small pin lines up with the circuit board. If you need to remove or replace the earpiece, gently lift that away. You can use a little bit of heat to soften the adhesive. Hopefully the replacement will come with some fresh double-sided tape, and when you put it back, make sure the pins line up each end with the casing. If you are only replacing the display, you can place your new one into the casing, making sure you feed the cable through that hole. And make sure you remove any protective film from the screen before you put the digitizer back in place. If you have bought a new digitizer with the plastic frame, you'll need to remove the proximity sensor and exchange it over to your new one. A small amount of double-sided tape holding this in place. You can use some heat to make this a little bit easier. And place that into your new digitizer frame. To remove the digitizer from the plastic frame, you need to use some heat and a plastic tool to lever the screen away from the frame. This can be done cold. If you use some heat from a fan heater, hairdryer, or here I have a hot air heat gun, it'll soften the adhesive and make it a bit easier. Try and get the temperature to between 60 and 70 C. Wearing some gloves so you don't burn your hands. Get the screen nice and hot, and using a plastic tool of some kind, gently lift the screen away from the frame. If you don't have a guitar pick, you can use a plastic knife. Be careful, the screen frame is not very strong and it's quite easy to break. So don't bend the frame too much, or you will need to buy a new digitizer that comes with the frame. This can be done cold, but you'll find it much more difficult to separate the digitizer from the frame. When you get to the bottom, take some extra care, as there's lots more adhesive that needs to be separated. Be careful with the sides as the frame is very thin and breaks easily. If the digitizer is shattered, you can place tape to prevent glass splinters from making a mess. And once it's separated, you can switch off your heat source. This is an original Nokia digitizer, which has this grey foam gasket to prevent dust getting between the screens. There's also a very small number in this corner, and the flex looks quite a bit different from this aftermarket compatible. There's no number in the corner, no foam gasket, and the Nokia logo looks like it might have gone a bit wrong during the manufacturing process. But it does work okay. If you're lucky, you will be able to reuse the existing double-sided tape. Make sure it's sitting down nice and flat all the way around the edges. If you cannot reuse it, you can apply some fresh double-sided mobile phone tape. This is extremely sticky and flexible compared to normal household tape. If you haven't got any double-sided tape, you can use this EvoStick Serious Glue. Apply a small bead around the outside edge, and you'll have about 3 minutes to place your new screen into the frame. Making sure it sits nice and flush with the frame around the edges. Then keep it under pressure for about an hour while the glue sets. If you have a new digitizer, it should have a protective film on this side, so you shouldn't have to clean it. Replace the proximity sensor, making sure it lines up with the small peg in the casing. And give that a good push down in place. Make sure the display housing has the earpiece at the top. Clean off any dust or hair that might be on the display. Remove any protective film from the digitizer or the display, and bring that down, making sure all those clips locate on both sides. And now have a close inspection and make sure there's no dust or hair trapped in between the screens. Once you're satisfied that's okay, you can replace the main board. Making sure the display flex isn't trapped. Push the main board down past the clips, making sure it's sitting down nice and flat and it's fully clipped in place. Now reconnect the digitizer flex. Plug in the display flex. Keep moving the plug around until you feel it locate and snap in place. Now we can replace the rear cover. Placing that over the USB port first. And pushing those clips down all the way around the outside edge. Replace all the screws. Only do these screws finger tight, otherwise you'll strip or snap the screw off. These last 3 screws are threaded. Now replace your SIM and micro SD card, the battery, and finally the rear cover. And you now have a fully repaired Lumia 520. If you have problems with the Digitizer responding, make sure you back up all of your data and perform a factory reset. This can normally cure problems with the Digitizer responding. If it still doesn't work properly, then you may have a faulty Digitizer and you need to ask for a replacement. I've seen some comments mention that the new Amber update has stopped the aftermarket digitizers from working on some of the Lumias. You can either roll back to an earlier version or fit an original Nokia screen. Thank you for watching. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I shall make some more. This sprung contact is for the GPS antenna. This one's for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Make sure these are sprung high enough to make contact with the rear casing. These 2 are for the 3G and GSM antenna. Make sure these are high enough. You can test a new digitizer by unplugging your existing one. Then take your replacement digitizer and plug that in. Now this is the tricky bit. You need to keep that pressed in and press the screen lock button. And now you can check to make sure the screen is responding okay. Once you're satisfied the screen is working okay, you can continue with the replacement.